Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. We are continuing on with our profession showcasings for each of the classes and taking a look at their new spear weapon. Today we're going to be talking about the Elementalist. In all honesty, one of my favorite interpretations of the spear and one of my favorite additions to Elementalist in general. So, because there's so much to cover with this profession, because there are 4 attunements, that means 4 sets of attack and spell skills. We're going to jump right into all of the weapon skills right now. So first and foremost, we're going to start with fire. But before we get into each and every single one of them, there is a little bit of a formula. Not as much as maybe other weapons in the past for Elementalist, but there is maybe a small formula for how each of these abilities are laid out. So first and foremost, you have your very basic auto attack that is seemingly getting thrown down, but it's an auto attack that sends out a spear. It will do some damage and or apply a condition depending on the attunement you're in. So it's very straightforward. Your second ability is some form of area of effect attack, either placed or in a line between you and the target. Your third ability will always be a self buff. This will give you some beneficial effects and or augment your next spear ability. Your fourth ability will be a ground target AoE where you'll have an inner ring and an outer ring. The inner ring will usually give you more benefits than the outer ring, but the outer ring will still deal a decent amount of its effect. And then your final ability will be your etching. Now this is where all your abilities tend to revolve around this particular skill and will allow you, if you reach certain requirements, to use an even bigger ability. So this etching will last for 7 seconds, and it also has a flip over skill of its own attunement's attack. You will use 3 abilities inside this etching to level that specific attack up. So that's how the spear is kind of formatted in terms of its 1 through 5 abilities. But let's get into the fire attunement first. So for fire attunement, you have Flame Spear. This is your strike damage oriented focused attack, and it does some area of effect damage to those who are around your target that you hit. Your second attack is Blazing Barrage, which is an AoE as well. It does a little bit of burning, nothing to sustain itself in terms of a condition damage build, but you have certain abilities and traits that will deal more damage if you are striking a foe with burning. Your third ability for fire is Seethe, which increases the damage of your next spear attack, not including your auto attack, by 20%. This also gives you might and fury, giving you even more damage. Your fourth ability is Meteor. It's fairly straightforward. You deal so much more damage to a target inside the inner ring, but you still deal a decent amount of damage to those in the outer ring. Finally, what you might have seen is Etching Volcano. This creates a spell circle around you, giving you might while you stand in the area. And when you use 3 abilities, you will enhance your Volcano ability into, I wonder if it has a different name. Lesser Volcano into Regular Volcano, with a very different effect as well. And this will just spew out a bunch of fireballs, dealing damage to enemies around the location. Fire is your strike damage oriented attunement, and I would say in general Spear for Elementalist is more strike damage oriented. Your second attunement that we're going to be talking about is Water. Now for Water, it usually has the theme of being a bit more self-healing, self-sustain, particularly when you are talking about a DPS weapon, and with the Spear that's no different. So for Water's auto attack, it is the straightforward spear damage, but it will also heal you if you strike an enemy. Your second attack with its AoE is the line attack. This is Ice Beam. This will channel a beam of ice between you and your target, meaning if you line it up properly, you'll be able to strike multiple foes in its path. This will also apply Chill to slow down enemies to keep them at bay. Your third attack is your self buff. However, this attack also comes with a movement effect. It's called Ripple. You'll evade attacks and leap or spin to a location, healing yourself. This means that your next attack that you use will have a reduced cooldown, and that's the unique buff that comes with Ripple. We'll try this out here in just a second once it comes off a cooldown. We'll do here, and then use your second attack. And as you can see, its cooldown has been reduced. I wonder if it says, yeah, recharge rate are reduced by 33%. Up, we'll talk about Undertow. This is your inner circle, outer circle attack. Undertow will pull enemies to the center. If your enemy is already in the center, though, it will additionally slow them. So you're getting a nice CC effect out of this attack, and then additional slow to prevent them from attacking you faster, and also chunking down some of those Defiance bars. Etching Yokel Hop. Yokel Hop will create a spell circle around you, healing you as you stand in the area, so a little bit more of that self-sustain. And then it will create a lesser Yokel Hop, which is a small wave that shoots out, but as is the case with all these etchings, using 3 attacks, either spear or utility attacks, it will level up this attack to be much stronger. Spin over here, use Undertow. Etching is almost off cooldown. For Yokel Hop, we'll use this. We'll use 2 of our shouts, and it's already boom. Bigger Yokel Hop. Now this deals damage and will also heal you based off of the amount of targets that you hit. I'm so very happy to see that water does keep up in its damaging department. Usually water will have much weaker attacks in favor of self-sustain, but they don't seem to have gone down that route as heavy. In terms of other weapon iterations, you're still able to do a decent amount of damage in water and not feel like you're hitting like a, mind the pun, a wet noodle. Talk about the air attunement. Air is also strike damage oriented, but has a little bit more of an emphasis of strike damage over time. And additionally, this is where you're going to be applying a lot of that vulnerability. So we have Lightning Javelin, which is your straightforward spear attack. It applies vulnerability to a foe that is struck. Next, we have Fulgor. Now, this is where you have a little bit more of that strike damage over time. You'll create a storm of lightning that inflicts damage over time to affected foes. Now, this will deal strike damage to those in the small area, but importantly, it will apply the Fulgor debuff, meaning that each second it will strike with a bit more of a stronger lightning hit. The beta iteration of this I found to be a little bit more exciting because that Fulgor buff lasted, I think, 3 seconds. So you really could stack this to like 20-25 seconds to have a continuous damage over time effect. And in PvE situations, it was really nice because you could just have that guaranteed damage lingering. But the way it works is you just place it down, it will strike, and it will additionally strike as well. This area is a bit small. I wouldn't mind if it was around 210 just to make it a little bit more forgiving because enemies tend to move around quite a bit. But if you're able to lock down a target with immobilize or crowd control effects, this is a nice ability to utilize, and it has a very short cooldown, so you are able to proc this fairly frequently. Next, we're going to talk about Energize. This gives you super speed, but additionally, it means that your next spear attack that you use will always critically strike. Use this to energize, and then use your 4th ability, which is your inner circle, outer circle once again. This means that if you use Twister on a foe that is in the inner circle, it will pull them up and cause them to float. It also does damage and applies vulnerability. But focusing in on that precise aiming and making sure that you know where your enemies are, this means it's even more important because you get a nice interrupt and a pretty lengthy float. So air is really, really fun to play around with. And the etching is Derecho. Derecho will apply Fury to yourself over its duration. And then using 1, 2, 3 attacks, you have Derecho. This is a daze in a line, and it does quite a bit of damage. So you have a nice crowd control effect on top of nice strike damage. Kill this Timberwolf. And then this leads us to Earth Attunement. Earth Attunement, much like water, tends to focus on self-sustain, but in this situation, it is still keeping up in that damage department. You have a couple of elements of protecting yourself with barrier and or keeping enemies at bay through things like cripple to make sure that they don't run at you as quickly. First, we have Stone Strike. Toss a light spear of stone to bleed your foe. This does give you a little bit of condition application, but I don't think it'll be enough to really slot you into that role. It's just something to add on to the damage over time. The bleed does last 5¼ seconds, so you can stack this up and move around a little bit and just have very small packets of damage rolling. It'd be nice if it lasted just a touch longer, but it's just something to consider. It's mostly there for the strike damage, but it is what it is. Your next attack is your AoE ability, and very similar to your water, this is technically a line attack, but it's not something that you place. It is a piercing strike. Happen to target a foe behind this Janthir bee, it will strike through this bee and then go to that second target right behind them. So you still get an area of effect application with this. It also acts as a physical projectile, so you're able to combo in your fields. You can see it continues to go through. Let's talk about the third ability, which is Harden. This is your really only self-sustain spell on this kit, and this will apply barrier to yourself, which is additional health. It's basically a little shield on yourself, but for Elementalist it is quite substantial, and it really helps out in open world. And additionally, this gives you the hardened effect, which means that your next spear strike will daze. Earth is oftentimes about that tanky, bruisery crowd control, so giving you this ability to have an on-demand daze, maybe where an ability would not have that when you don't use harden, means that you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to crowd control. We'll go 3 into 2. So we gain that barrier and the hardened buff. We'll hit the 2 and boom, got the daze effect. So that means if a target was using an attack, it would have interrupted that attack, but because it was just moving, it just continued to move towards us. The fourth ability we'll talk about is Fissure. Fissure creates a fissure at a location, crippling foes. Foes in the center take increased damage and are also weakened. So this means you have a little bit more of that self-sustain and self-defense by applying weakened to a target, which means that their attacks have a greater chance to be glancing, which is a weaker form of their strike. And then finally, we have Haboob. Haboob, best skill, best spell in game. Haboob will pulse stability on you, meaning that you will not be susceptible to crowd control effects. Haboob is also a dark field, which means if you use a projectile, you'll be able to lifesteal, giving yourself a little bit more health. And I think some blast finishers will allow you to get like a dark aura. Haboob is a really strong etching as well, as when you level it up, it will apply a really strong linear AoE attack and also blind foes. So we'll test this out here. Harden, boom, boom. And then blind, weakness, vuln, and cripple. So it's just a flurry of debilitating conditions. Haboob is really, really strong. And then we'll swap into all of your attunements in combat, because that is how Elementalist is supposed to be played, focusing on a bunch of attacks at once, weaving them in where you can, and trying to get as much benefit as possible when playing. Now, the gameplay role of this is, as I mentioned, much more strike damage oriented than possible other weapons you can play as an Elementalist. And I'm really happy to see that it's also a 1200 ranged weapon, meaning you can play at range. You don't have to just deal with staff and maybe some of its slower casting times and lineups and you know, waiting for those effects to hit. You have much more on-demand access to all of your attacks with the spear weapon. And it's a really solid iteration of a ranged kit for the Elementalist. As for the builds you might want to play with Elementalist, I would definitely recommend Tempest. It is fairly straightforward, and you're able to get some damage buffs by using your shouts and also your overloads. However, with Elementalist and Elementalist Spear being so long-ranged focus, your attunements do tend to take you into close quarters combat if you really want to get use out of these overloads. Many people have requested this, and I'm just here in a video also going to be requesting it. I'd love to see them add something to Tempest, a trait, which would allow the Tempest to channel these overloads from range. And I think Gale's Song would be the best trait to slot that into. I've also been playing around with Catalyst. Now on this character, I don't fully have Catalyst unlocked, but during the betas and on my other characters, Catalyst fits really, really well into this playstyle because its profession mechanic is focused around these spheres, which are basically boon areas. They're very support-oriented in terms of generating these buffs for yourself and your allies. And playing with these etchings, it definitely slots in very, very comfortably. So you're able to pop these etchings to buff yourself, I shall note. But then on the Catalyst orbs, you're also buffing yourself and allies around you. So you definitely gain a little bit more support for the Catalyst. I haven't personally played around with Weaver, though I have heard that some people have found some success with Weaver. But to note, Weaver is a bit more melee oriented with all of its profession mechanics and also its utility skills. So you might have to play in and out of combat and in and out of range thresholds, very similar to the Tempest. So thank you everyone for coming on by this behemoth of a profession and a behemoth of a weapon, because we had 4 attunements to go through, so I hope it was as quick but also as informative as possible. Thank you, thank you. Comment down below your thoughts about the Elementalist Spear and maybe which elite specializations you are using it with. If you'd like to get early access to these videos and some exclusive videos, also supporting the channel, you can head on over to my Patreon. If you'd like to purchase Janthir Wilds, maybe you'd like to get into this phenomenal expansion, and or you have some friends who have been maybe wanting to play and try it out, you can use my links down below. Thank you so very much, ArenaNet. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care. Mwah.